Well, shall we begin? And then Jan. So I think Sarah is going to try and connect with you and fix the technology. So we just stay on the screen. So we'll prompt you when we need to get there. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Pavan Sukhdev. I'm the CEO of Gist Advisory. That's a firm that actually does sustainability accounting, impact accounting, and also president of WWF International. I'm delighted to have joining us this evening on a very interesting session on new accounting methods that reveal food's true environmental costs. Three people who are from this space, and starting from the top, we have Christian, who is the commercial director of Lebensbaum, an organic Germany-based spice and coffee company. So we'll hear from him. After him, we'll hear from Jan Köpper, who's the gentleman below, and he's in charge of impact, transparency, and sustainability at GLS Bank, which is a German ethical bank. And we have my friend Lauren Baker, who's the lady on the left-hand side, and she's the director of the programs for the Global Alliance for the Future of Food, a group of more than 25 organizations who collaborate in this direction. My task is just to introduce our speakers and to just comment on what is this topic, what is this whole true cost accounting all about. In a word, it's about ensuring that we don't only measure what is economically visible and what trades in markets, but we measure and recognize the value of what doesn't trade in markets. Many years ago, I was in charge of a project known as the Economics of Ecosystems and Biodiversity. And that was all about understanding the value that nature delivers to us every day, which is invisible: clean air, fresh water, the pollination from bees. No bee has sent you an invoice, even though their pollination is estimated to be worth 150 billion euros per annum. All those things are real, because without them, our food system wouldn't exist. Without pollination, imagine the food system. Without rainfall, imagine the food system. But all these things don't issue invoices. They're part of the natural cycle. That's an example of economic invisibility, and true cost accounting can solve that by accounting for the natural capital that is represented by soil biodiversity, ecosystems, and their services. What tends to happen, however, is that there is a belief that, well, just because we are now accounting for the value that nature delivers, and therefore also accounting for the costs of losing nature, that, things are going to get more expensive, the wallet's going to get affected. But the thing is that we are constantly making the mistake of thinking that we only have one wallet, the supermarket wallet. But actually, we have many wallets. There's also the health wallet, because, all that endocrine disruption that takes place as a result of some chemicals, or for that matter, the antibiotic resistance that happens due to the excessive use of antibiotics, or the obesity and the diabetes because of that too much sugar. The health wallet is pretty important, but people don't account for it. There's also this other thing called the climate wallet, because food has a cost to the climate, and these are real wallets. I mean, they've got stuff in them, but you're not accounting for those. And of course, to me, perhaps the most important wallet is the big one, the future generations wallet. And boy, it's got lots of stuff in it, but we are not accounting for that either. The problem that we keep thinking only of the supermarket wallets and say, oh no, food's going to get more expensive. Sorry, that's not true. It actually is very expensive already. It's just that you're paying for it in different wallets that you don't account for. The purpose of true cost accounting is to recognize that there are these many wallets. Some of them may transact in money, some will transact in health, some will transact to future generations, and others will cost the climate. But the costs are there. The question is, are we recognizing them? Are we measuring them? Are we valuing them? And are we managing them? Because if you, as the saying goes, what you do not measure, you do not manage. And true cost accounting's essential premise is that if we start measuring the natural capital that resides in ecosystems and soil and agriculture, start measuring the human capital that resides in our health, which is affected, and indeed in the inputs that we provide as human beings into agriculture, and recognize the social capital that binds together communities of farmers and how they help each other and manage, and also recognize the produce capital, which is, by the way, the only thing that we do, which is the machinery and the resource inputs into agriculture. If we account for all of those together, then we have something holistic. And that holistic form of accounting is called true cost accounting. If you're not doing it, don't worry, you're not alone. Most nations don't do true cost accounting. That's why we need inclusive wealth accounts. And most companies don't do true cost accounting. That's why we need impact weighted accounts or inclusive wealth accounts as they are now known. So there's progress, there are solutions. But right now the challenge is, how do we apply this to the very important world of food systems? Because this is where the cookie crumbles. There is so much in food that isn't just measured in the prices that we use to calculate yield from a hectare. So yield per hectare is the only metric that is commonly used to measure food systems. But what about the billion people employed and the value of that sustainable employment? What about the climate costs? Almost 47 to 53% of the entire food system's costs are climate costs are the single largest driver of climate. What about water usage? 80% of water, for that matter. What about soil biodiversity and human health? According to the Global Nutrition Report, our diets have become the -- driver of the global burden of disease. So I invite now Christian to give us his wise words on his experience in this space. Tell us, Christian, about your insights on TCA related to sustainable raw material sourcing.
Pavan, many thanks for that introduction and many thanks for the invitation today. I'm very happy to share with you my experience on true cost accounting. And let me go straight into the presentation here. So switch to the next slide. So yeah, I'm here to present our experience and my experience with respect to true cost accounting. Just briefly said, who are we? We are a mid-sized company based in Germany, an organic company, pioneer in organic food, and we specialize in tea, coffee, and spices. So why do we use true cost accounting? Because we, same as Pavan said, believe that true cost accounting is the right and the necessary way forward. We need to include all external effects into our accounting. We need to move to a new world of accounting, which has all wallets in it. And yeah, and we need to have as well a standard approach for it. And that's actually the reason why we've set up a project team together with some partners, other companies, and Soil and More and TMG Consulting, to develop this standard, to really make it happen, because I think that's what's up now, what needs to happen. We all need to work with the new standard and bring it into real life. And yeah, just to share on my experience. So what is our true cost accounting approach we are working with? First of all, we need to talk about the scope, because the different scopes where you can apply the true cost accounting. And we are talking here mainly about the upstream processes and the core process. So this means we have to go back to the supplier where all the raw material is harvested, and the core process in terms of production, where you look at energy and waste handling. There is another scope, which is a downstream process, and this is very much about the consumer, and this is pretty difficult to tackle, because how can you say, for example, if you look at tea, how much water does the consumer need to boil the cup of tea? Does he use a full kettle full of water, or just a little bit of water? And this is difficult to judge. So that's why we focused on the areas of upstream and core processes. And then, yeah, we've identified a couple of key parameters, and here we're talking about the wallets. So in our standard approach, true cost is about the wallet of natural capital, the wallet of human capital, and the wallet of social capital. And then it's about how can you really understand how the impact is. So you need to have a standard metrics. You need to talk about the categories, the indicators, and then it's about the evaluation model, how you can quantify all those effects. So first of all, the natural capital, that's a very important capital and wallet, as what Pavan said. So here, the key elements of that wallet are climate impact. We're talking about greenhouse gas emissions. We're talking about CO2 sequestration. we're talking about the soil. Yeah, how is the soil erosion, or is there any soil buildup as a positive effect? Yeah, we're talking about resource scarcity, so water usage, water quality. Yeah, and then other elements like metal scarcity or fossil fuel depletion. We're talking about the ecosystem. This has got a lot to do with how you treat your soil. Are you using any fertilizers or not? And this can lead to acidification, eutrophication, and ecotoxicity. So, and for all those, you can use models to quantify the effect. And as part of our standard approach, we've used the cool farming tool and the life cycle assessment tools. So a lot of tools are back, or not a lot, but there are some tools in the back of all those indicators to quantify the effect. Beside natural capital, we're talking about human capital, and that's listed at the bottom right. We talk about health, and very important to look at the human being. So is there any fine dust? Are there human toxicity? What is about the pesticide ingestion? Is it a risk? And is there an occupational health risk at the, for example, at the production sites? And that all needs to be taken into account. Yeah, and last but not least, social capital is a final element of the true cost approach of our parameters. We talk about remuneration, human rights, working condition, and gender discrimination. So there is a bunch of really important indicators. And
yeah, full screen your page. Could you make your page full screen? Somebody's asking.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Apologize. Okay. And yes, you need to find out where you are on all those indicators, and that is challenging. You need to go back to your suppliers, and of course, the more raw materials you have and the more suppliers, it gets more complex. But there are ways beside having interviews and asking for all those points that statistics can be used, and that's part of our project, how we can really make this representative approach for your total supply chain. Then once you've adjusted, or once you've get to know about your indicators and where you stand with all those, then it's about the assessment and what you can do with it. And this is just an example on natural capital assessment. This is about the quantification of all those indicators. And there are a lot of possibilities what you can do with it. So in terms of natural capital, for example, you can make an assessment on 4 products, or here is product 1, and the indicators. And this is the result of the quantification. And you can see that the impact is per consumer pack 51 cents. So what does that mean? So if you look on a product level and you have got a retail price of your organic, let's say tea, for example, of $3.59, then you have got a positive impact for the big wallet, as Pavan mentioned, for the environment, for everything, of 51 cents. So there's a benefit. So taking everything into account, your product is in fact cheaper. Yeah, and then of course it's about what with other products. If a conventional product is just slightly cheaper than your product, however has a negative impact on the environment, then it is in fact much more expensive. And this is what you can show on a product level. Yeah, but this is just one example which I'd like to give you what can be done with true cost accounting. And then it's about how we deal with that in the future. We want to roll this out with the project team. It's a very powerful assessment. We think it's necessary for the future generations. If you've got any questions, and that's why I put this name here in the email address, you can raise those questions via email and learn more about this project.
Super, thank you, Christian. And that's a lovely example and something that hits home, because finally, as consumers of products, to see how much is the impact beyond just the wallet, the supermarket wallet, I think is really interesting. And that's the learning exercise. I'd now like to welcome Jan Köpper, who is the head of Impact, Transparency and Sustainability at GLS Bank, a German ethical bank. And I'd love to hear your take on true cost accounting in this space.
let's see first if the audio works. Can you hear me well? Wonderful.
Yes, it does.
Quite some issues,
Right.
so please apologize. Let me check if I can also share my screen.
And if you could make it full screen, please, because people do have a problem reading otherwise.
I will definitely try to do that. Can you see this full screen right now? Yeah? All right then. First of all, let me kick off. I just want to share some...
Sorry, not yet. We are still seeing the icons on the left.
Okay.
I'm seeing your screen, Jan.
I'm seeing my screen, yeah.
Yeah, GLS Bank, I see it.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
but maybe to full screen. Yes, to go to full screen.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, you just need to see it full screen, right? Okay. Let's see.
If you could go to display, that would be great. Yeah.
Yeah, I will try to do so.
Yeah.
Is it full screen right now?
Not yet, but why don't you carry on? Otherwise, we'll be wasting time. But carry on.
I've just been changing my laptop. So let me start off real quick.
Sure.
Basically, for us as GLS Bank, it's very critical to also account for all the different capitals that account for our economic value. So in general, what we have seen over the past few years is economic system just triggering financial capital imperatives. And this has led us to a situation where we have not been active in economic boundaries or planetary and socio-economic boundaries that suit for sustainable activities and development. So for us, I just want to be real quick with just one thought, basically looking at our sector. I hope you can see the next screen right now. It's a little bit small, but let me tell you what it basically is. In the midst of this graphic, you see the financial sector and basically the function it has in stabilizing the economy. So on the left-hand side, I've written down information efficiency, which is basically the idea that all market participants need to have efficient distribution, availability, and quality of information to make sure that we reach allocation efficiencies, which traditionally have been growth, employment, and of course, risk, liquidity, and stability. But what comes now is that we are changing the whole pattern in terms of what is the function of the financial market when we talk about sustainable development goals or seeking the future we want or other aspects of societal development and sustainable development. So what we need to do is to rethink the way that information is distributed and integrated in the financial sector and the financial sphere. And at the moment, we have a shortcoming in terms of understanding the externalized costs of economic activities. So for us to be resilient in the way we hand out credits and we hand out financing, we need to make sure that we understand the true value of an economic activity. And this is why we are working with Soil and More, as well as Geis and Lebensbaum is doing, to really come up with accounting methods that allow us for a full insight into what are the positive and negative externalities of our creditors and investment objects. And just to make it sure, because I wasn't really clear in my explanation, but we need to understand what the function of the financial market is. And the function of the financial market is not to make profit, but the function of the financial market is to stabilize the system. As we now talk about new narratives, we are not talking about employment, infrastructure, and growth anymore, but we're talking about sustainable development. And if the function of the financial market is to account for sustainable development, we need to make sure that information is distributed the way that we need it to have allocation efficiencies that contribute to sustainable development. This is why we are active in true cost accounting, and this is the way we are implementing it at the moment to really make sure we understand the true economic value of entities and economic activities. I will skip here because the slide is quite small, but the basic idea is there's a key function and we need new ways and new dimensions of information.
Thank you, Jan. Thanks for these thoughts. And it's good to see another banker. I'm an ex-banker myself, but it's good to see us focusing on these issues. It's for too long that they've been hidden behind. I'd now like to welcome Lauren Baker to give her comments. It's an area that she's been working on for a long time and promoting. So Lauren, over to you.
Thank you so much, Pavan and Christian and Jan. It's really a pleasure to hear about your work. The Global Alliance for the Future of Food has been supporting a true cost accounting accelerator over the past few years, really to build the field's strengthen and mainstream true cost accounting. And this work is clearly driven by the kind of businesses we're seeing at the table today through Jan and Christian's presentation. So really engaging business, finance, and investment leaders. And actually earlier this week, I was part of another session at Verge, which was looking specifically at the role of investors and kind of catalyzing systems change and addressing the multiple externalities we're all driven to address. So I wanted to just briefly talk about the tools that we're developing, and my colleague Amanda will post them in the chat box. Really fundamentally, the group that we're working with is thinking about principles and frameworks to harmonize approaches to the work in true cost accounting. True cost accounting is developed to allow you to evaluate your impact, like you've heard, and evaluate your risk in the same detailed and transparent way that traditional accounting does for your balance statement. So it's really, broadening that lens and thinking about these different capital categories. And so in our work, it's not only about principles and frameworks. There's a really busy, active, dynamic marketplace out there that's involved in this incredible innovation process where practice is kind of pushing the frameworks and the development of associated metrics and methodologies. We're also developing tools together. So, how do we provide clear, practical, consistent, and transparent guidance for companies, policymakers, and others who want to pick up this work and be able to compare, the tea that Jan's company, Christian's company is producing, with the tea that you find with another tea on the supermarket shelf. And we really need to get to a place together. This community is really committed to getting to a place together where that consistency and transparency has been created and is reliable. So I just want to call out a couple of these tools. I mean, at the foundation, we feel like the foundational framework for this work is the work that Pavan mentioned earlier. The TEEB Agri-Food Evaluation Framework developed out of UN Environment with 150 scientists, economists, and policymakers. Also, we've recently released implementation guidance that should be in the chat box. And this is really a straightforward walkthrough of how to apply true cost accounting. We're really excited about this work. And then there's the work that has been mentioned that TMG and Soil and More are leading with a variety of coalition of companies. So Pavan, I'll leave it there because I know there's probably lots of questions in the chat, and I'd like to make sure we have time for some discussion.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Lauren, for those remarks. And we have a few conversations going on here. Let's see what we have. There have been a few Q&As going on. Sorry, I'm not seeing the. Am I missing something here? There is a chat which is open, but I'm just seeing a number of Q&A. There's a comment from Scott Bryson saying that it's great and important work, and he's glad to hear it. There's a few pieces of information shared by Amanda, and a question from Kenji Tabaris thanking us for the overview and asking if we can disclose any of the specific, I think this is meant for Christian actually, any specific tools. I think you mentioned the Soil and More tool is the one that you were using, Christian, is that correct?
Yeah, correct. So I mentioned as well in the presentation a link to where you can ask basically more about the project work we're doing. So there is an email address. I don't know whether I can show it again. but it's about info@soilandmore.com, where you can raise the questions and learn more about the model, because there is a variety of indicators and so on, and it's really, you need to understand it, how to apply it, and so on.
Okay. There's a question from Nicola Pile-Molto asking, would it be that only regenerative processes would have positive environmental costs? I think what she meant is environmental gains. Would it be only regenerative processes? Probably not, actually. Quite a few. But anyway, would you care to take a stab at that, Christian or Jan?
I think it's not necessarily regenerative. I think you can have, well, there is certainly a positive impact to that. But if you look at the variety of indicators, then it's not only about natural capital. You can have social capital and human capital as well. So there might be very positive effects if a company is really good in those areas. Yeah, and then it's not purely one. It's not just about regenerative. Certainly, that has a very big impact on the natural capital side.
Sure. Yeah. So and I think I'd agree with what Christian is saying there. Certainly, the climate impacts and water impacts of most regenerative systems tends to be positive, or compared to other benchmarks. But other systems also have significant value in terms of employment and output, GDP output. So these are the values that they do add. There's another question. There are two more questions coming up. One from Vanessa Smith asking, any contributions or comments on the work of SEEA? Would anyone want to take a stab at that? Or do you want me to try that? Very briefly, the system of environmental and economic accounts of the United Nations is more in the background for accounting at the national level. So it's much more about the accounts of society, GDP accounts. And it does connect with this, but I will say this, that they use the same four capitals. The United Nations Inclusive Wealth Accounts, as well as the SEEA, works on the same four capitals framework that has been described here by Christian and mentioned here by Lauren Baker in connection with the Tea for Agriculture and Food projects. There's another question from, sorry. And
sorry, Pavan, I'll just add that we've actually compiled, in association with the guidance document that I mentioned, an inventory of these, that connects SEA to other databases, framework. So this is all available. I mean, it's not comprehensive yet, but we're really trying to build out these tools so you can access the work that's happened before that's connected to true cost accounting. And of course, there are different, environmental accounting databases and frameworks. And then there are databases and systems of accounting related to the social human health capital side too. Amanda could put a link for that up in the chat as well.
There's a question from Anjali Marok asking, do you distribute this true cost across your suppliers? What has been your experience with buy-in or pushback from a financier and from a corporate standpoint?
Well, I think this is a very good question, because if you go to that depth of questions to your suppliers, and that is about a trusting relationship. And of course, the closer you are with your suppliers, then you can go to that level, and it's about trust as well, and really long cooperation. It can be, I think, tricky. If you work with a dealer, for example, where you source a lot of materials, you can't really get to the bottom of where the material comes from. So the closer you work really with the supplier in the field, where the material comes from, and the better your relationship is, if the trust is there, the confidence, and then you can get the information. And I think as part of the approach, there needs to be as well some where you can work with with data where you can extrapolate assumptions. So for companies who can't really get 100% to the bottom to their suppliers with questions and so on, it should be easy to handle. And this is, I think, something where this model needs to go as well.
Cool. Thanks for that. And there's a couple of resources that have been shared by people. Just trying to spot the other questions. The question from Nicola asking, how are investors responding to this? We are starting to see investors understanding that companies are exposed to climate risk, water scarcity risk, etc., and altering their investment strategies accordingly. Do you want to comment, Jan, given that you're from the world of finance? What's your general take on the investors' response to true cost accounting? Is it begun or is it early days?
I think in terms of specifically environmental and social risk, there's a huge movement at the moment all across the globe. So supervisory authorities are catching up to the idea of integrating these forward-looking ideas of what is happening in the future to actual nowadays management targets and strategies. So specifically, more green investors are catching up to these ideas, but we still have a lot of uncertainty in terms of the scenarios and the interrelations of, for example, certain developments such as water scarcity and civil wars or migration and all these kind of things. So we are currently working on developing these kind of scenarios to make sure that investors can now actually take forward-looking investment decisions in taking into account these future outlooks of how things will evolve in the future. More and more people are catching up to these ideas. There are a lot of movement all across the globe. The Network for Greening the Financial System, for example, a network of supervisory authorities and central banks is catching up with climate scenarios to really make sure there's more sophisticated and scientific foundations of the way we look into the future and how we need to act right now to make sure we create the future we want. There's a lot of tension at the moment, yeah.
Cool. Thanks for your feedback on that, Jan. I have a feeling that we've probably run out of time because it's past the hour. If we have any last question or last comment, I'll try and read that from here. There are a couple more resources that have been mentioned to us, a Regen network and so on. And a little comment about supply chain risks being exacerbated by COVID. Yep, that is the case. Okay, so I think if there are no further questions, it's my great pleasure to thank our panelists, Lauren, Christian, Jan. Thank you so much for your comments and for being there to answer questions. Have a good day, and let's try and do what we can to promote true cost accounting across all capitals, natural, especially because that seems to be a bit of human and social. Thank you. All right, cheers.
Thanks, Pavan. Thanks, Christian and Jan. That was a great session. Fantastic to be part of the Verge
Yes.
community.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Take care. Thanks. Bye-bye. Cheers.